Welcome to this meeting of Speakers Committee on the Electoral Commission. We're here today to consider the main estimates for the Local Government Boundary Commission for England and the Electoral Commission. We will hear firstly from Local Government Boundary Commission for England. First of all, welcome to Beverley, who has recently taken up position of Chair of the Commission. Thank you for that. Could our witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, I'm Beverley Smith and I'm the Chair of the Commission.
And I'm Ailsa, Irvine, the Chief Executive of the Local Government Boundary Commission. Excellent.
Beverley, would you like to start briefly setting out your first impressions of the Commission, and we will then open up to questions, if that's all right with you, on the main estimate.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I first say thank you for the opportunity that I've been given to take up the role of the Commission Chair. It's really been an exciting start this year. Sort of early reflections, I guess. I would say that I've joined a well-run professional organisation that I think really values its independence and has a strong sense of direction, and I think that comes from the corporate plan that was agreed just last year. In terms of the current work, obviously we're delivering against those corporate plan objectives, but there has been a real focus in terms of the statutory role of the Commission for those reviews that we can do that are appropriate and not tied up with local government reorganisation. And also I think we're making a positive contribution to the local government reorganisation consultations, and that's both through councillor numbers and also through the interim electoral arrangements. But we do have a window of opportunity, so our real focus to drive improvements that will put us in the best possible position for what the Commission is going to look like in the future with the changing programme. So this year our focus is on enhancing and our technology and our processes to really drive some efficiencies through the review process itself. Strengthening those communications and engagement to look at improving public understanding and awareness of what we do. Reduce some of those barriers to participation and ensuring that communities are well informed and can take part, and obviously that contributes to the wider aim around democratic health. And then thirdly, obviously our focus is about continuing that commitment to ensure that we operate efficiently and provide value for money. I think it's been a really good start. I've only been here for 2 months, but I'm really enjoying it, and I feel really positive about the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Well, we'll try not to ruin all that now. So thank you very much. Can we start with the main estimate? So your main estimate proposal suggests a 19% increase on last year's resource budget. But you'll be aware that the Treasury are also noted for us a 14% underspend at the supplementary estimate. So can you tell us something about your confidence in forecasting? Because obviously, from an external perspective, it looks as though you have overestimated what you'd be spending in the past. So why aren't you doing so this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think we find ourselves in a very different position than when we brought the main estimate to you last year, at a point where we didn't have clarity on the shape and timings of local government reorganisation or what that was going to mean for us and our role. Hence the challenges that we faced with the budgeting and forecasting for this year and the supplementary estimate that you mentioned. Where we are now, we have a much greater degree of certainty and understanding as to what's expected of us over the coming year in relation to local government reorganisation, and that's enabled us to have a much clearer and stronger understanding of what our next year ahead is going to look like. So in the main supply estimate that we've developed this year, it has come in broadly in line with what we'd expected in the corporate plan, in fact slightly beneath that, but still significantly higher than last year. And that increase from last year is driven primarily by some planned investment. So rather than being around core growth, it's around two specific areas of planned investment, which gives us certainty that we know we're going to spend it. So that's around investing in our digital infrastructure. So we've carried out a digital maturity assessment and developed a digital strategy. So we've got a targeted series of investment that will help us to become more efficient and effective with the use of technology. And we also have significant investment in communications and engagement. So this year we've carried out some focus group research to help us to understand people's understanding of local democracy and how our key messages and consultations work. And that has identified a number of areas for us to focus on as improvements for this year. So I think we've got clear plans in place to spend the money. We know what we're doing this year at a greater degree of certainty than we had previously. And we've got robust project plans and governance in place to make sure that we keep to spend. And also, I think, not being complacent, we have taken steps to try to further enhance how we manage our budget throughout the year. So we've introduced enhanced monthly reporting to make sure that we are keeping that close monitor. So if any issues were to arise during the year, we'd be very confident that we'd be able to identify and address them. Thank
you. Can I dig a little bit deeper on the specific you've mentioned around the digital strategy? There are two line items it might be worth exploring. So one is the 0.4 million uplift you're asking for digital and technology activities, and the other, even more specific, is the rise in capital expenditure to redevelop the website. You'll be aware of the glittering record of delivery in public sector IT projects. So can you help us with your level of confidence about how those projects are going to be delivered on time and on budget?
Sure. So I take the first of those in relation to the 0.4 million uplift in relation to digital and technology projects. Effectively, that spend falls into three main areas for us around cybersecurity, digital skills and enhancement of systems. On cybersecurity, it's investment that is going to enable us to embed and sustain the improvements that we've already made this year, making sure that we can keep pace with the ever-changing cyber landscape and can maintain the security of our systems, and that's embedded into the day-to-day way that we deliver our IT work, so there's confidence that we'll be able to deliver on that front. In relation to digital skills, we're currently in the process of carrying out a digital skills assessment, and the detailed findings from that is going to inform a targeted training programme for our staff and commissioners to make sure that we're delivering our technology most effectively. And then the third angle around systems, it's really around making sure that we're maximising the use out of the systems that we already have, making sure that we're leveraging the interoperability between systems, so making sure that our finance, HR, review systems all speak to each other, helping to limit the time for data processing and support our decision making. And it's also as part of that, we're looking at how we can build lessons from AI pilots that we're currently undertaking to use that to safely carry out some routine tasks and to free up our staff time and capacity. So we have a detailed digital plan that accompanies our strategy, and we're establishing an internal digital oversight committee that will help us to make sure that we deliver that package of activity. One thing I should have said in relation to digital skills is we do realise that as well as training up our own people, we are a small organisation of 22 people. There will be times where we need to bring in expert resource, which that is provided for in the budget as well. And one of the areas that we'll be looking to do that in is to help to shape the specification, the procurement for the new website project. On the new website project, where we are at the moment, we've been focusing this year very much on identifying what the user needs are to make sure that we're going to be building something that's going to deliver what it needs to. So we've completed a year-long website survey, which has given us a rich vein of feedback about the challenges that people find with our current website around accessibility of information, using it on mobile devices, accessibility of PDFs. So there's a rich vein there that helps us to understand what it is that we need to build. It's also been shaped by the focus group research that we've carried out, helping us to understand just the basic information needs of people and the fact that we need to tailor that for different audiences. So all of this information is being used to feed into the specification for the website, which we're in the process of developing now. We are preparing the tender documentation, and we're on track to go out to market in the early part of the next financial year. We've done some soft market testing already, and that has given us assurances that the timescales and the ambition that we've set is realistic and is deliverable. But obviously we will manage the project closely. And one of the things that we're making sure is right at the heart of it is user testing throughout, so making sure that we're not going to go live with something that doesn't work, and that fundamentally what we deliver is going to help people to engage with reviews and with our work.
Does that extend to once the new website's up and running, measuring public engagement with it and understanding how well people are using the new product? Yes,
absolutely. I mean, the evaluation is going to be built into the project from the outset so that we can understand and continue to evolve. I mean, I think we don't see this project as being a one and done, but actually it's about making sure that we build a system that can continue to evolve and meet user needs and as technology changes.
Beverley, anything to add to any of that?
No, I think we're fairly confident that we've got the right plans in place to make sure that we can deliver on time and to a specification that's going to make a difference to people in terms of their engagement with us.
Thank you. Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to move us on to local government reorganisation, an area where there is some more clarity than there was when you came to talk to us last year. How is the organisation ensuring that you're learning from previous reorganisations? And how do you plan to respond to future changes, such as a change in the franchise to include 16 and 17-year-olds voting? How are you looking at that?
Yes, I think when we've been carrying out a role in local government reorganisation, we've been able to draw on the experiences that we had in previous rounds, including the most recent rounds in North Yorkshire, Cumbria and Somerset. And what we've been able to do is, while we're not able to carry out full reviews of local authorities until they exist, what we have been able to do is to provide our expertise and experience and use that learning to try and share that with MHCLG and with local authorities themselves. So we've been providing guidance and support, drawing on that lessons to try and help people to guide them as they were developing their submissions, and now as they seek to develop their interim electoral arrangements for their first set of elections. Sorry, remind me of the second part of the question. 16, 17. Yeah, so in some respects that has less of an impact on our work directly. One area it will impact on is in relation to the electoral forecasts on which we base the wards. Some of the initial analysis we've done has suggested that it is less likely to trigger intervention reviews and cause significant electoral equality challenges because it's more likely to be spread across wards, across different local authority areas. I think we're also obviously continuing to monitor the situation around the potential for automatic voter registration, which actually in itself may have more of an impact on those forecasts. So we're just continuing to really just keep our eyes on that as it progresses, because it is something that could trigger the need for some intervention reviews to address electoral inequality, and fundamentally is something we're going to want to work with local authorities on, so that when we are carrying out reviews, once any franchise changes have come in, that the electorate forecasts that they provide to us are as robust as possible.
Probably one for us to pick up next year when you come and see
yes.
us, I expect. Okay, next question.
Sorry. I just want to come in on that. Obviously, we've been through this situation where not going to be elections. We've now got elections in Lancashire. Lancashire's now still not been decided how it will be broken up. Expectations are it's going to be 4, but if we assume it's 4, the wards, who is going to do the planning? How are we going to get the wards in place for an election next year? If you've not put in a budget in which to drop all this, because it's happening in different areas. So in your financial project, I've not seen how you're going to allocate time, effort, wards, and if you're going to do the simplistic thing that will be using county divisions, divide into districts, doesn't quite fit. Because within that, you've got 2 unitaries who have a completely different format of how they've arrived at the council wards. And even so, you can't have differentials in voting with the same representation. There's got to be some equality to electorate per ward.
So essentially the approach that's being followed for local government reorganisation, which is the same as was followed in North Yorkshire and Cumbria and Somerset, is that there isn't actually a formal role for the Commission at this stage in the process, because we can only review authorities once they are formally established, and because there won't be time between the authority being established and its initial elections for us to carry out a review. What has happened is that the government have included the interim electoral arrangements in the structural changes order. So that is something that is developed by local authorities and then brought forward in the government order. The role that we have is, once the authority has been established and comes into effect, so after the elections, after vesting day, we will then come in at that point and do a review of the authority. So we haven't got a power or formal role at this stage in the process.
I think what we are trying to do, though, is support that local authority in terms of providing that guidance and advice to find a pragmatic way through in order to get past that first election point, because it's such a short period of time without us having a role. It's just about trying to help and support them to get through that. And I think in terms of capacity and capability of us doing that, we do have that capacity to be flexible and agile and be able to respond, I think, as we can at the minute.
You'll have to be agile. You'll end up with months in which to prepare it, but you're still not getting around the equality between trying to bring a unitary into a county and who do you work on? Do you work on the district's representation or the county's representation? How do you ensure that the value and equality is equal to the new authorities? Because the two don't match. It's playing dominoes. Somebody's got a set of 6 and somebody's playing with a set of 9, and they don't really come together. So just think about that. And Simon, I think you want...
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if it's of help to anybody around the table, but were those local authorities, Lancashire or elsewise, to ask you for your advice? I just wondered if I could sort of press upon you the rather useful way we did it in Dorset, which addressed that when we were merging or creating a new council from a series of district councils and a county council, not a unitary, I accept that. And that was so that neither authority ever thought it was the sort of top dog. They were new ward boundaries, none of which reflected or followed their predecessor ward boundaries. And the Local Government Boundary Commission was obviously involved with that to provide the boundaries based on that thinking about numbers to make sure that there was relative parity of voters per ward. And then that was the basis upon which the shadow authority was elected. And that commanded universal local support and no gripe. And it seems to be a very good way still of driving that forward.
In an ideal world, the position we would be in would be that we would have time to do a review in time to make sure that we were setting the electoral arrangements. Given the timetable that's being followed and the process that's being followed for local government reorganisation, it's simply not feasible for us to carry out that work in that time. As I understand it, it was a slightly different approach that was adopted in Dorset than has been adopted subsequently. So I think what we are trying to impress upon local authorities is how they can use the existing boundaries that they have, not necessarily lifting entire divisions or entire wards, but thinking about the combination that they can use to try to get as close to electoral equality as they can and to respect the key principles that we would do if we were the ones that had that responsibility to be able to set those boundaries.
I understand the time pressures, but that presupposes nobody is going to advertently or inadvertently try to gerrymander, because once these things are set, they are set. And I really urge that there be sort of some conversation going back to ministers. One is in the room as we speak, which is get that wrong, and the local authority, the new authority, doesn't command universal support from the get-go. It starts on the back foot. If people go, oh, it was the county divisions that trumped the borough ward or whatever. And it's not something that can be sacrificed just because of an artificially tailored timetable. I'd suggest if that was the case, then the timetable is both artificial and wrong. And entirely likely to be self-defeating, because it's always going to be the upper tier authority that has the whip hand in these matters, always.
Ultimately, it will be a decision for MHCLG and ultimately for government and for Parliament as to the timetable that the process proceeds to. That is outside of our control. We can only work within the process that we are set.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate it entirely, it's out with your control. But do you have, from your collective experience of having delivered local government reorganisation elsewhere, do you have any reflections on the points that I have raised, either to say yes there is a point, or no, you're talking out of the top of your hat?
I think it's probably quite a difficult one for both of us to answer, in that I could take that back and continue the conversation with the team. We weren't directly involved in the previous rounds of local government reorganisation. We have been having the conversations with CLG, with the authorities, to share some of the learning that we have, and we have always set out that in an ideal world we would carry out that review. So we have raised that point throughout the process.
And I think, we are where we are in terms of what the timescale is, and we don't have that statutory role in that time from the new authority being in place to their first election. What we're trying to do in that gap is give as much guidance and support as we can in terms of them achieving, that local authority achieving the equity across the board. So we're doing as much as we can within the limits we've got, because we don't have a statutory role in that period. After that, we then can go in and do a full proper review. But hopefully that little bit in the middle does provide some comfort in terms of our support and guidance around equity, councillor numbers, etc., that they would want to consider.
Not without risk, is it, that approach? Reputational risk.
Well, it's for the local authority to work within those processes and to obviously have our guidance and support along the way, but we are not responsible. Authority? It would be the local authority, or the new local authority.
That's the, yeah, yes, that's, we've got two at the moment.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So it's the new local authority that would need to put together the interim electoral arrangements before the first election. We can help and support that with guidance, but we have no statutory role in that time frame.
Can I just say, I know you're not in charge, but surely you must write and express concern because the concern is it's a complete shambles. Parties can't select because they don't know what they're fighting on. The fact is they don't know how they're going to work it. The district boundaries were updated. The parliamentary boundaries have been updated. The county boundaries were never touched, are completely out of sync with everybody. So the default position that I would expect to be established would be that you would follow the county, which is not in sync with neither parliamentary nor districts, who have actually upgraded their own boundaries, which do not fit with the county. They don't marry together. Plus, on top of that, you've got two unitaries that's been stuck into the middle of it that's completely different. And my worry is that it's an express train that's coming. We can see the buffers, but nobody's going to slow the train down. But when we hit the buffers, the shadow authority with her, and then what you're saying to us, oh, we'll now do it, which completely changes the makeup of what the local authority may have been, because they're completely different boundaries. Now, I have a real concern. I might not be in charge, but I want to express my concern. Hopefully, the people who draw up the boundaries might be willing to express some concern to make the government to wake up to the problem that's been created. Okay, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to take us to the corporate plan, and you're forecasting a reduction in expenditure from 27-28 onwards, which reflects the expectation that costs associated with the devolution white paper would no longer be required. Is this assumption still valid?
The short answer, yes, it is broadly still stands. When we brought the 5-year financial plan to you in the corporate plan, we had the first 2 years were showing quite significant increases, and that was because of the specific provision that we'd included as allowance for local government reorganisation, and it also included some specific investment in relation to our website and communication, some of the specific pieces that I've talked about earlier on. When we get into 27-28, we think we're broadly still in the right space that will allow us to continue to invest in our people and systems, but without the significant set-piece investments that we've got planned for this financial year. That said, we are a small organisation with a significant proportion of our budget is tied up in our people and in accommodation. So there is a risk that we may find that it's not sufficient to sustain our investments, or if we identify new work or are asked to do new work that we haven't anticipated. But we would start from the position of trying to manage it within that envelope. The greater challenge for us is going to be at the back end of the corporate plan when we get to particularly 29-30, when we are carrying out the reviews of all the newly established local authorities. We're going to have a peak of activity at that point. At the moment, it's quite difficult to quantify what that's going to look like. But it's that peak that may have some impacting on our resourcing in due course. What we're doing at the moment through the investments that we're making in our processes and trying to increase our use of digital and resilience is to try and make sure we're as well placed as we can be for that peak so that we can limit any additional resource need.
Is there any remaining uncertainty that's making that planning at the back end harder than perhaps it needs to be?
I think at the moment, I think we anticipate probably by the summer, if the timetable that has been put forward, local government reorganisation continues to be followed and we see decisions on what the shape and scale of new local authorities are, that will help us to understand how many local authorities are going to be when their next elections are, and that will enable us to start to do a bit more of that detailed programming. So I think we're starting to do some of the thinking now in the scenario modelling, but if we do get that certainty as we expect with the timetable that's been put forward, then that will support to help us to understand that a bit better.
Okay. That concludes our evidence from the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our guest from the Electoral Commission. Could you please introduce yourselves for the record? John, who kicking us off?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm John Pullinger. I'm Chair of the Electoral Commission.
Vijay, Rangarajan, Chief Executive of the Electoral Commission.
And Chris Please, the Corporate Services Director of the Commission.
Thank you for joining us. John, would you like to start briefly outlining your main estimate?
Yes, I mean, this estimate represents the costs associated with the second year of the corporate plan, which this committee approved last year. And it represents the culmination of a lot of listening and engagement with political parties, electoral administrators, parliamentarians generally, and each member of this committee. And the shortest way I can describe it is a recognition that our electoral system is part of critical national infrastructure, and we need to invest in it much more heavily given the kinds of threats that are facing us, and the need to modernise and think about it in terms of its fitness for the future. So last year was very much a kind of set-up year. We were doing a lot of recruitment into new roles and planning and preparing the way for what this year's budget will begin to deliver. And on top of that, we have the work we're doing with the Minister and her colleagues on the representation of the people bill now before the House, and obviously immediately in front of us a set of elections on May the 7th in various constituencies up and down the country, just to make sure that we do our part in making sure they run as smoothly as possible. So that's the primary element to it, Vijay or Chris are more than happy to give more detail if you wish.
Needed to be added, or should we go straight in for questions?
Just to maybe say that
Vijay.
we've made some significant progress on some of the bigger projects, which were the ones that are actually eating money in the corporate plan. The ones I just single out would be political finance online, which we may come back to, the education work, which is now live in a number of schools, being tested out the materials, but a good chunk of materials are being produced, and the idea is to get those around many schools in the course of the next academic year. Voter information project is now up and running, and we're redoing the guidance for parties and volunteers and the website as well for the public, so a lot of that needs updating.
If not, we'll crack on. Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll come on to the local elections in just a moment, but just in general terms around the main estimate. The Commission's budget has risen significantly compared to its pre-election baseline as a result of the 5-year corporate plan. How's the increased expenditure ensuring measurable value for money for the public, and what steps are you taking to demonstrate this? I know you've touched upon some of those, Chair, but
I'll break it down into 3 elements, if I may. I mean, the first part of value for money is to do things that are valuable, and I think the projects that Vijay's outlined were the ones we thought would add most value for voters, support political parties to play their role, and also help electoral administrators run elections as smoothly as possible. So when we submit our annual report to you later in the year, you'll see in concrete terms the value we're adding in each of those projects, and we've got key performance indicators attached to all of them. The second aspect of value for money is making sure you only spend money when you need to, and really bearing down on costs. And I might invite Chris to say something about that in a minute. But the first element of that is not spending money when we don't need to, and we've returned money through the supplementary estimate this year, and that will be our policy in the future. If we get through the year and realise we don't need the money, we will return it. And obviously our current estimate we are pretty confident is what we need, but if we don't need it, we will not spend it. The second element of that, of course, is being efficient in what we do, and I think there are a number of things that Chris's team has put forward in the last year that we will be able to carry forward that will demonstrate efficiency. But the final bit of value for money is having the processes that make sure you really kind of deliver on the promise month by month, and significant investment in our financial capability and our procurement capability so that we're getting contracts that add value for money, and we are monitoring spending across the Commission on a daily basis. But if you'd like, Chris, I'm sure can certainly give you a little more detail.
Yes, please. That would be helpful.
So we've previously spoken about some of the things that we've done to drive value for money in the organisation. I think an example I've used previously is accommodating the Boundary Commission in our London office. That saves us money, but it's also really efficient utilisation of public office space as well. As part of that, we've refitted the office as well, and that's led to about a 50% reduction in our power costs. Some more recent value for money steps we've taken. So we have previously had a large number of IT contracts. We've consolidated now and bundled those together. As a result of that, we're driving savings of about £100,000 per annum, so quite significant for us. And we've also been able to use new technology in the organisation, and also some people join the organisation with relevant skills. And we've been able to build a corporate performance system in-house, and that saved us about £150,000 as opposed to going to the market. We have numerous examples, but those are probably the ones I'll mention briefly.
Thank you. Can I just come on? I just want to ask about the local elections. Special local elections sort of at a relatively short notice. We all know how tricky elections are, even with lengthier notices. Your main estimates note that you're urgently assessing the financial implications of the reinstatement of the May 2026 local elections. And based on your current analysis, will the Commission be able to deliver this additional electoral activity within the current budget allocation?
The answer is yes, but I think it'd be helpful if Vijay gives you a bit more detail
as well.
Yes, so the answer is yes. And so this morning we just authorised another, and I'll set it out, £231,000 of expenditure, and that's going to be spent in the areas, so particularly Suffolk and Norfolk, East and West Sussex, and in Chorley, where the elections are now reinstated. That is within our current budget, so we're not asking for any more money, but we have to actually make sure there's a kind of equality of experience across the country for everyone who is having that election. I mean, I think electoral services teams, our own staff, the AEA and others have done a great job in getting things back on track. So I'm pretty confident that this will all work, and we'll absorb it within the current budget. The sort of thing which gets a little more complicated is buying advertising spend at slightly shorter notice, booking halls at slightly shorter notice. So that is where I think quite a lot of the work is going. I might just add we're going to run 3 main campaigns as before. There'll be the usual registration campaign, which will run in all areas where there are elections. There'll be a voter ID campaign, Bring Your Voter ID, running in England, but obviously not in Scotland and not in Wales. And there'll be a Your Vote is Yours Alone, our electoral security campaign, again running in all areas where there are elections.
Can I just ask one additional question before the Speaker comes in on your reference to Chorley there? But it was just on this point, I have to say I've got every sympathy for party managers, returning officers, as well as yourselves in terms of trying to organise something. And you've highlighted some of the areas, but are you pretty confident, given that you will be getting halls much more last minute, local government premises much more last minute, and even some other public and private spaces at a much more last minute basis than maybe you would have done? Do you foresee any financial difficulties with that at all?
We haven't yet got a complete picture from local councils and returning officers, who are actually obviously booking quite a lot of that. We're doing the communications side, but at the moment, thanks to a lot of hard work by them, really, I think that's looking okay as far as we can see. I think there is a real strain on some candidates who weren't expecting to have to stand, and parties who have had to distinctly accelerate their candidate selection procedures. Yes.
I just very finally, I should have said that. Just as not having somebody, I don't have a dog in that particular fight, but candidates, parties, and the local authorities have my absolute sympathy, and you as well, for pulling this together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just a quick one about your communications with the public, to reflect the fact that for some people who are paying attention, at least they thought they weren't having elections, now they're being told they are. Does that change the nature of your communications with the public about the fact that there are elections at all, and if so, how?
It means in the areas where the elections are reinstated, we're trying to actually make sure everyone does understand the elections are going ahead. So that's the additional spend, the 231,000 I mentioned, is to make sure that we are actually reaching everyone. We're trying to do so on a lot of different channels this year as well, because just normal social media reaches some people, but not others. So this year we are, for example, going to be advertising on screens inside supermarkets, which is a very good way of reaching some people. In-game advertising, which is another completely different demographic.
To vote in the bagging area, that sort of
thing.
Got it.
We can put that up. Some of the social media, we're now going to be on TikTok for the first time, so we're going to be out quite heavily advertising that. So we're trying a lot of new techniques to make sure that we actually reach where voters are, basically.
Okay, I'm quite intrigued advertising outside a supermarket. So the supermarket they go to hasn't got elections?
On the screens.
To confuse everybody, that's all. Because next door, I'm surrounded by Bolton, Wigan, Blackburn, who's not got elections, and they go to their supermarkets to shop. Now, if you're going to put adverts up there, I think you're going to confuse more people than you're going to enlighten. So I think that's my first one. Surely, if you really want to get to it, are you not sending a letter to every individual household so we know we don't miss anybody? And what dispensation are you going to help people with who thought there was no elections, may have booked holidays, they come back, the postal vote's there, and we have this ridiculous situation where you have to put in the postbox. We've had a debate today that shows that your mail doesn't get to the town hall in time. The fact is that if you come back, you used to be able to push it through the letterbox to the town hall where all the votes are counted. You won't allow that. And yet, we will lose votes because of the intransiency that you've set up, even though you've reinstated the elections. Just to say, I think it was the right thing to do to have the election, so I'm not arguing about that. But I'm really bothered because all the advertisement was said the elections were cancelled, newspapers told everybody. It's how do we get people back into realising that's on. So all the great thing of putting some advert up in the supermarket doesn't wash with me. Dropping a letter through everybody's door, actually, I know everybody's been contacted, rather than this hit and miss when do you last look at a screen in a supermarket? Any one of you? I don't. No, come on, let's be realistic. If you're serious, let's be serious about getting people engaged. Why don't you drop a letter through every door?
There will be polling cards dropping through every door, and that absolutely will be a mail drop. And we've just been working with Royal Mail to make sure that those do actually reach every person, including, because Royal Mail have to stand up a big operation in the areas of reinstated elections. I mean, Mr. Speaker, you know we think you're absolutely right about some of the issues of postal votes, and many thanks to the Minister and her team, but I think in the Representation of the People Bill we will be significantly fixing some of the problems that we definitely saw at the 2024 general election.
But you've still not really answered the big question. Why can't you send a letter explaining the reinstated, not a polling card? Because people say, oh, they may have delivered that by mistake. And some people don't get the polling cards just out of interest. I have a big rural area. Why can't you send a letter explaining the elections have been cancelled, they're now reinstated, and you can put in the letter, if you are not registered, please register, and put some of the facts in to actually make this election work. Not wasting our time on the supermarket. Let's get through to the people who are going to vote. Let's get an explanation. And those people who aren't on the register, we can put in the letter, this is how you do it. And if you have booked your holidays, you can get a postal vote.
We can go and look at whether a letter would be good value for money. At the moment, the way that
That's in a supermarket in the wrong place.
Yeah, the supermarket is one, and social media, and our TV advertising, and of course there'll be the usual billboards and
you spend all that on TV adverts, I'm sure it's cheaper to send a letter. Just out of interest, regional TV, most of them in our regional area haven't got elections. It's very small areas. Surely it's better to send letters.
That's not, I think, been our experience so far. We're mostly focusing on local radio as well.
Well, all right, let's judge it by this. TV is Granada, let's say. BBC Luke North. Manchester's no elections.
Yep. Speaker, the Mets have got elections this year.
The Mets have. But you weren't cancelled. I'm on about where elections were cancelled. The whole of Liverpool didn't. The whole of Manchester didn't. Cheshire didn't. Cumbria didn't. And just only some districts in Lancashire. For that value of a cost, and the BBC don't put your adverts on, surely on that benefit, to write to the individuals on the smaller number concerned, I think you can explain why and how your vote still matters. Well, you don't put that on TV.
Very happy to take that away, find out a cost and whether we can actually write to people and then judge whether we would reach additional people by doing that. We are trying to make sure that everyone does have a chance of seeing material that makes very clear the elections are going ahead in their area, because that is a fundamental thing. But we will definitely go and look at whether an additional letter would help.
More people will see something dropping through the letterbox than all the other alternatives. I really do. I've got great concerns about this election. I want it to happen. Democracy matters, but I want to make sure we go out of our way to ensure people are informed after having so much information that it wasn't. Please, Simon.
I mean, just to make the obvious point, the greatest penetration to generate awareness is by definition something landing on the doormat. I'm not entirely convinced that requires a huge amount of analysis just to work that one out. But the elections were postponed and then reinstated, not by your organisation's choice. It would strike me as being a perfectly legitimate ask back to the department, to central government, to say this was a situation created by your initial decision and then a decision changed. This is something that HMG needs to do with the imprimatur of the Commission to make sure that it is seen as being a sort of official, dispassionate document. But I can understand the reticence of the Commission wishing to spend money on direct mail. I agree with you, Mr. Speaker. It's a better use of money than TikTok and TV adverts and radio and all the rest of it, all alongside. But I do see the point about who should write the cheque to pay for it, and I do think it should be His Majesty's Government.
Just the proof of the pudding. Every electoral party drops an election address through each letterbox. If they've got it wrong, why do they all still do it? Lisa, sorry.
Thank you. Just to supplement your point, really, Mr. Speaker, I entirely agree that it's really important that voters know that they have a vote and that they are expected to use it. So I agree that we should spend some time ensuring that they're communicated with properly, particularly when there has been a lack of certainty and there has been change. I think, in addition to your point, Mr. Speaker, about the importance of a piece of paper going through letterboxes, different demographic groups get their news and information in different ways. So I think it is right that you're looking at social media. And I also think that there are some organisations out there who particularly communicate with young people. So whether it's My Life, My Say, Shout Out UK, they did an awful lot of work with voter registration in the last election. And they learned a lot about how best to communicate with young people in a way that encouraged them and empowered them to use their vote. And so I just encourage you to use the learning of other organisations who are doing similar sorts of communication to supplement the very good point Mr. Speaker made.
Well, I just say we're working very closely with those with Shout Out UK, with some of the disability charities as well. So our partnerships work with some of the organisations to reach voters who otherwise they are harder to reach, and you can't reach them, say, through supermarkets or through social media. But we do need a number of different ways to reach all voters. So, Mr. Speaker, we will go away and we'll talk to local authorities who I think have a little additional money from the government for the reinstated elections and see if there's a way of, and I think it's a good idea to write to everyone.
In fairness, I think Sam's given you a good offer. Could have check off the government. They've created a problem. Get them to pay for the solution. Dead easy. Simon.
Always.
Sam, you don't look cheerful on this, don't you?
I think Vijay's right. I think that actually there is additional funding coming from government to the affected local authority.
Yeah. But my point is, I have a big rural constituency that I believe those people need to get the message.
And as Vijay said, they will each receive their polling card as usual.
But without the information about if you're away, how you register, if not, this is a great opportunity to get more people to vote, and I thought that's what we're all about. If the mistake can be made on cancelling the election, we'll need to be having the debate.
Would you like me to write to you, Mr. Speaker, about that?
I think the committee will be better.
Okay.
So. Well, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the Political Finance online programme, if I may. Could you set out the revised cost requirements for that programme and explain whether the changes reflect a change of scope and or a recalibration of the project's strategic direction?
So I'm happy to talk about the finances, and Vijay might want to talk about the project more generally. So we initiated the project, Political Finance Online, in beginning of the current year, following approval of the plan and the estimate by the committee. Our resource costs for this year are expected to be to budget about 400,000. Our budget for 26.7, and included in the estimate is about 1 million, split roughly between capital and resource spend. And we are still expecting the total project cost to still be in the order of 1.7 million, which is what we included in the corporate plan. However, we are still assessing the implications of the elections bill. Annual licensing, authentication and training costs will probably, in fact, certainly will increase. And we need to understand whether we can absorb those. I think our view is that we probably can, but they'll certainly be somewhat higher than we had anticipated.
I think it'd be worth you unpacking.
But just on that, so you have the elections bill in scope, as it were. There's obviously the important piece of work that Matthew Rycroft is doing, and I think one would be it would be eccentric to suggest that process will end up with the Commission not having to do more.
So just to add to answer your question, the original scope of Political Finance Online was in order to help the political parties actually do their work and publish their material. That is all going to continue, and we are still aiming, as planned, for a go-live date in summer 2027. So that's on track. What the bill would do, if Parliament approves it, is to add candidate finance into the scope of what the Commission does. So then, I think, as Chris has said, we will need to expand basically the scope of what the system does, but we'll try and do so in stages so that we don't delay the essential work of PFO, and we can then actually work on the candidate regime itself. I think the Rycroft review will also come obviously in some form into the bill. We'll need to take that into consideration. It might change it, but we're very, very keen, given partly the history of PFO, not to jeopardise the kind of core delivery of the system for political parties, because we've now done a lot of work with the parties on all of their accounting systems, the data transfers, how this will actually simplify their lives as well. And I think they are very keen to get a much better political finance online system in place by next summer.
Thank you. So it's a sort of a watch this space. Would you anticipate that you must be able to sort of slightly envisage additional responsibilities or enhanced responsibilities likely to be passed to you? Is your assessment that there's headroom to absorb, or that would require a revision?
There are a whole range of elements in the representation of the people bill that will add responsibilities and cost to us. I mean, the government's published an impact assessment, and we've been working with them to make sure that everybody who's going to face extra costs knows what they are, and therefore we can plan accordingly. We have not included those in this budget. As Chris has said, we think because of the timing of the bill, it's very unlikely that they will be significant in this financial year that we're talking about. Although if they are, of course, we'll assess them and come back to the committee. But as far as PFO Online is concerned, as Vijay has said, we've got a core project which is designed to support political parties fulfil their current duties. Yeah. But it's designed to be modular, so that if we get an extra element, for example, for the candidate spending regime, we'll be able to bolt that on and it'll fit within the system. Okay. So we'll be able to assess the costs and it won't get in the way of the core delivery. So I think we're reasonably confident that the design is robust to whatever comes out after Royal Assent for the bill.
Okay. So from political finance to bricks and mortar, the main estimate indicates that a supplementary estimate may be required in relation to capital upgrades at the Bun Hill Row office. Given uncertainty around the lease position, what discussions have taken place with the landlord to date? And in the context of lease uncertainty, how are you ensuring that any proposed capital investment represents both prudent and necessary expenditure that is benefit to your operation and not the capital asset of the landlord?
Thank you. When I start, and Chris will want to add more, our lease runs until 2030 in Bun Hill Row. Until late 2027, our lease will remain unaltered. So what we're now thinking of is discussions with the landlord on the future lease and lease extensions and the usual rent negotiations. The way, as you know, the accounting system and IFRS 16 in particular work is we would then have to declare as capital the entire future cost of that lease in the year in which we take it on. And that would be the thing that would trigger the possible supplementary estimate. So this is really about trying to work out where our future lease would be in Bun Hill Row. We are not intending to take on any additional offices in London or to grow in London, mostly because London is just very expensive. We get very good people there, but it is very expensive. So our primary growth is going to be among people scattered around the whole country, a lot working from home, and of course in Belfast, Cardiff and Edinburgh. Chris, may want to say more about the value for money tests we use?
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. So should a lease extension become available, we'd carry out a value for money assessment, rather similar to the approach we took for Edinburgh. So we'd be looking at local market rates, and we'd also be using an external specialist advisor to help us assess value for money. As Vijay said, we have been overtly targeting growth in the organisation outside of London because it is expensive. And we have seen significant growth in home workers, significant growth in the devolved offices. Obviously, home workers, the accommodation cost is nil. Devolved offices, the accommodation cost is much lower than London. So again, trying to drive value by growing outside of London where we need to grow.
Given the fact that the end of the existing lease is within sight, and you would be deploying public money for improvements, surely it makes sense to establish with the landlord an in principle renewal of the lease before a penny piece is spent in order to not have abortive expenditure.
Very much agree. That's exactly the discussion we are currently having with the landlord, is the prospects for an extension, and they have a...
And you must be a good tenant. You haven't defaulted on the rent.
Nope.
You haven't had any wild parties, or wrecked the joint in any way.
So I think we are a good tenant, and we hope that we're going to. We do want to drive some value for money in terms of commercial rents in London are rising and very high. So we are probably quite a hard negotiator, I hope, as well with them to try to actually make sure if we're going to stay, we are doing so on a good and long-term basis.
Because we are obviously all legislators for rates of tax and so on and so forth, trying to drive value for money and to ensure best use of taxpayers' money. Do we have your assurance that there will be no capital expenditure on the building unless or until the position of the renewal of the lease is known? Because if you have to move, almost by definition, your costs are going to go up just to reflect changes in market conditions, notwithstanding the fact that everybody seems to be working from home and there seems to be thousands of square feet of office space just sort of sitting vacant, looking for somebody to occupy them just to keep the mice out.
So the capital we referred to in the supplementary estimate was only in case there is a lease extension and we have to account for it in this next year. We're not spending large amounts of money on the buildings themselves. I mean, that's largely for the landlord. Or in upgrading anything that we're doing there. So we're not investing a huge amount. Okay. Clearly, if we're going to stay for a much longer time, we'll look at the use of the space. We're keeping it up to date as a good tenant, basically. Chris, is that point?
That's right. We would if we were looking to invest in upgrading the property, we would also carry out a value for money assessment, taking account of the duration of the lease.
And it's an FRI lease?
So the lease is accounted under IFRS 15. That's right.
No, is it an FRI? Is it for the repairing and insuring lease?
I don't know.
I'm not sure what it is now. We can write and check.
It's important to know, yeah.
Okay. Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the funding returned at the supplementary estimate was largely attributable to electoral activities outside of your control, a significant proportion related to recruitment delays and corporate plan delivery. So in that context, how have you calculated the proposed uplift to the corporate plan budget for 26-27?
So I'm happy to talk to that one. So we commenced our budget planning in June of last year, and that is to meet the estimate cycles for Wales and Scotland, who run ahead of this estimate process. And that's given me an opportunity to oversee the full budget cycle since I joined the Commission just over a year ago. Despite quite large uplifts in our funding requests to Scotland and Wales, that's mainly due to election events, of course, both of those estimates have been approved, which is obviously very pleasing. Just in terms of this estimate, I think there's a number of factors that should give us increased confidence in this estimate. One is that most of our corporate plan projects are now underway, so we can be more confident about the activity and the spend profiles associated with those projects. We've established a small recruitment team, and we're now consistently delivering recruitment to our plans. And our forecasting capability has improved really significantly. So we're currently at 95% accuracy, and I expect that to continue to improve. And I'm really pleased that we've been able to reduce our funding requests for our core costs by about £1 million in the estimate. That's mostly because we've critically reviewed our approach to requesting contingency funding, but I'm still confident that our reduced bid still allows us with sufficient contingency for unplanned events.
Good, thank you. Vijay, you and I talk about AI a lot, but I'm going to talk about it in a different context and ask you about how individuals who have access to AI write to us, but probably write to you as well, and generate considerable correspondence. And I just wondered if the Commission has seen any change in the volume or the nature of those inquiries. We as parliamentarians have seen AI-generated correspondence increasing, and I just wondered if it was similar for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. The number of formal complaints we receive is holding roughly steady. It's 9 or 10 a year, and that we've had a look. None of them are apparently AI-generated. The general inquiries run at about the 10 to 12,000 a year. Some of those could be, but we haven't seen very many. It's largely members of the public at the time of an election, or parties or agents phoning up and asking. We are seeing an increase in FOIs, and it's not a massive increase. I think it's a 38% increase compared to 2024. Again, we've had a look. We don't think they're being generated by AIs. The one area where we're seeing a significant increase is in parliamentary questions. I think in 2022 we had 2, 2023 8, 2024 8. Last year was 94. So I just want to say thank you to Sir Jeremy for being the person fielding.
I think it's all down to me. That's what it is.
But that is one area where we're seeing more. There may be an issue there. I think we're also seeing that in Parliament as well.
And are you able to use AI to improve your efficiency in your processes as well? I think you touched on it earlier.
We're not using it yet in terms of anything that's going out of the building. We're using AIs in order to look at things outside in the rest of the world, for example, social media tracking, and we may come back to that. But at the moment, something that leaves our building and goes to a member of the public or to an MP or to Parliament, no, that's human-generated, and we'd keep it that way until we were much more certain that it was really accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just if I can come in briefly on AI. Vijay, have you picked anything up from Holyrood or the other devolved administrations? Because this AI generation of parliamentary questions is something that came up there. And when you talked about 94 questions, actually the number, there were hundreds of them, they reckon, being generated. Is there any learning from one another or on that? Because nobody's saying that we should be preventing anybody from putting down parliamentary questions. It should be encouraged. But that, in how we manage AI in terms of engagement with the wider public and amongst ourselves is something I suspect will become a much bigger challenge for all of us.
No, we haven't actually talked about numbers of parliamentary questions to others, but thank you, we will.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I may, we have been talking very actively to the Scottish Parliament in particular about some of their social media monitoring, which is picking up some of this kind of AI stuff. And I think the Scottish Parliament done a really interesting job that's resulting in conviction already for illegal content being found, and we're trying to build some of that into the work we're doing on deepfake detection, which we will be deploying ahead of the elections this May. So I think there is very good working between the three parliaments on these kinds of questions.
It just comes into focus at election time.
It does,
obviously
absolutely,
come
yes.
here as well. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, What we are finding is that there are more AI-generated questions coming in. The volumes are becoming phenomenal. The problem there is that then we use AI to answer them. There's no humans involved. Where are we going? And are you ready for it? In which case, I'll hand over to Rachel. Who is with us.
He's real. How's the Commission prioritising its programme of work in response to the initiatives set out in the election strategy, including votes at 16, the candidate registration, improvements to voter ID, and what criteria is being used to prioritise and resource all of these activities?
The main criteria we're using, I mean, this is again working very closely with the Minister and her team, is when the various provisions would come into force and when voters and others in the process need help. So the very first, and we've already started this as you know, is the education work to get out to schools, because the lead times are very high. The second, I think we will pick up things like potential changes on candidate registration, addresses, and all of those issues in the guidance that we would produce at the normal time. I think the most complex is the political finance changes, which, when the bill is passed, if the bill is passed, and then secondary legislation is done and the guidance is done, there will then need to be a lot of training of political parties, their treasurers, staff across and people across the country to be able to comply with the political finance rules in time for the reporting and financial years when it enters into force. So that there's a lot of stages that would need to go through, and that's probably the tightest one of the timetables. But we will sequence each of these in as quick as we can, really.
And just bring Lisa in as well, just to back up that.
Yeah, it's thinking about the election strategy, and we mentioned the bill where it's not yet final, but we know the broad thrust of a lot of it. I notice in your estimates report that you talk about electoral reform, and it remains unclear at this stage whether additional funding will be required in 26-27 for electoral reform. Now, I'm somebody who would embrace the need for change when it comes to electoral reform. But the bill has been written in a way that means electoral reform is out of scope. So it's been on purpose written so that a change to the voting system, for example, couldn't be introduced as an amendment. When you're looking at thinking, at planning and at deploying resources accordingly, how agile are you able to be? Because the bill as it currently stands will be amended as it passed. I feel reasonably confident. If you just look at Rycroft, the government has said it's open to some of the changes there. How agile can you be looking at reflecting the changes that will come through to a final bill?
So we can definitely be extremely agile as the bill goes through, and we will obviously be commenting on amendments and briefing parliamentarians if anyone would like as the bill goes through on how this could be implemented. We have already begun thinking through implementation of quite a few of the provisions. So particularly the candidate finance regime, which is a major set of issues. We need to have quite a lot of thought in place. The Know Your Donor regime, that is really important and complex. Again, how would we do it? How would the guidance work? I think the one area which I'd flag, which is a sort of electoral reform, but a major set of issues, would be automatic registration. And the steps that would lead to that, for example, integration into other business processes. When you apply for a passport, when you apply for a driving license, could you then be added to the register at some point, even before one gets to full fat automatic registration? We've learnt a lot from evaluating the 4 local authority pilots in Wales last year, and we can see how elements of this can be done. And because of the sheer number of people not on the electoral register who are eligible to be so, we would obviously be very, very supportive of any speedy implementation of automatic registration. It looks like it's possible to do so while maintaining accuracy and increasing completeness of the register. So there is a great thing to be able to do. But that is, at the moment, a lot will depend on the implementation programme, which I think obviously the department are working on, but is not yet set in timing terms. I could just flag there's one tension there which will also take some very careful management, which would be if the Welsh Government go ahead with an automatic registration system in one part of the UK, potentially the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government are thinking about it, and the UK system was on a different time scale. We would then end up with a differential registration rate and very different registration systems in different parts of the UK.
Different electoral systems already exist in different parts of the UK.
Might I add one thing to answer Lisa's question? In terms of the costs you asked specifically about this year, because of the timing of the bill and when royal assent might come, the costs in this financial year are unlikely to be a cost that we're not able to absorb. But if it turns out there are things we need to be doing earlier in order to accelerate, as Vijay said, we will come back to you later in the year. But at the moment, we don't think so. For next year, for 27-28, if the bill goes through more or less as it is, there will be quite substantial costs. And that's why we're working with the government on the kind of public costs generally. It's obviously not just for us, it's for local authorities and for central government too.
Mr Speaker, if I could just follow up with one more. The Electoral Commission, you made some public comments when the bill was published about some of the measures that you welcomed, but also some of the areas where you felt the impact would not be as strong as perhaps had been hoped. I wonder if you could say a little about that. And then as a supplementary point, I know that before my time on this committee, the Speaker's Committee had expressed views about, for example, the strategy and policy statement. I wondered if, Mr Speaker, there were measures where this committee could agree. We wanted to encourage government to ensure the Electoral Commission had the powers and resources we would expect as a committee. I wondered if there was a role for this committee in encouraging government in a direction we thought was a good thing.
And just to answer that would be for them to come to us to give them the money. Yes. So I think the encouragement is that way, and then we can address it.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for that. But just specifically to respond to that question, I mean, we are working very closely and very well with the Minister and her colleagues, and many of the aspects of the bill are things that we've talked about for a while and are extremely welcome. And you won't be surprised to hear me welcome, in particular, the strategy and policy statement repeal, which we touched on at the last meeting with the committee. And in some of the other areas, then we will be briefing parliamentarians and working with you and supporting the government, particularly following the Rycroft review coming in, which is very pertinent to some of the issues that we're talking about this afternoon.
Rachel, let's get you back.
Thank you very much. And may I say that we were very clear as the Electoral Speakers Committee on the Electoral Commission about rescinding the policy statement, and so again personally pleased to see that, Minister, as much as being on the committee for a while. Just building on them from where Lisa was and the helpful reply you gave, John, I'm going to sort of merge a bit of a couple of questions I had around costs but risks as well, and you rightly said about this coming financial year is one thing, but then looking ahead would be another, and its costs come both financially, staffing and technically, and there are risks to that. So could you just sort of maybe give us a bit of a flavour about some of the, build on what you've already said about the mitigation you might be putting in place to manage the risks, given that we're in that sort of phase of the bill to come through Rycroft and more than one financial year? So.
Well, I'm going to give you a very simple answer. We've already discussed one risk, which is around divergence in different parts of the UK, but my assessment is the biggest risk is the timetable. The government is really keen to get these provisions in place before the time of the next general election and do so consistently across the country. But if you work back from that to now, as Vijay has illustrated, there are a lot of steps to take, and in some ways the simplest step is the primary legislation. But if you think of the timetable, we get primary legislation maybe before Christmas, hopefully before Christmas. Then we have secondary legislation, then we have guidance, and then we have the most important bit, which is implementation, which is supporting parties and campaigners to understand their responsibilities, train them, and ensure they are ready to comply. But even more so for local authorities, who, as always, are the unsung heroes of this, where there will be significant work for them to get everything in place. And, of course, for us, government and others. But that is the stage we must absolutely not let be compressed. But the clock is ticking quite loudly to us. So a key thing for us is to try to make sure we have the right consideration, but also consideration which is consistent with delivering this properly and effectively by the time it needs to be delivered. There are loads of other risks, but I just thought I would highlight this one because I think that is the most significant. I don't know if you want to add anything, Vijay.
No,
I think I agree. In all of that, it's the political finance regime, which is the one where, given when the reporting year starts and the financial year starts, it's tight to be able to get all that in place by, say, 2028.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions? Can I first of all thank you for the evidence for coming before us today. That concludes all that we're doing. Order.